flashing siren in the dead of night. A corrupt cop looking for an easy target to stroke his own ego. But when Officer Bradley Miller planted drugs in the back seat of a luxury sedan, he made a catastrophic mistake. The man in handcuffs wasn't a victim, he was his new boss. The rain slicked the asphalt of the West Side Expressway, reflecting the dull amber glow of the streetlights. It was 1:15 a.m. on a Tuesday, the graveyard shift, the time when the city's pulse slowed to a crawl and the shadows stretched long. For Officer Bradley Miller, a 12-year veteran of the 12th Precinct, the shadows were where he did his best work. Miller sat behind the wheel of his patrol cruiser, chewing on a matchstick, his eyes scanning the sparse traffic. He was a man who carried his badge not as a shield for the public, but as a weapon for his own ego. Beside him sat Kevin Foley, a 23-year-old rookie fresh out of the academy, still wearing the stiff, uncreased uniform of a man who believed in the rulebook. Foley was nervous, constantly checking the dispatch screen, eager to please but increasingly unsettled by his training officer's cynical worldview. "Watch this," Miller muttered, leaning forward as a sleek, midnight blue 2024 BMW 7 Series glided past them in the left lane. The car was immaculate, a testament to wealth and status. But it wasn't the car that caught Miller's attention. It was the silhouette of the driver, illuminated briefly by a passing street lamp. A black man in a tailored suit, Miller's jaw tightened. Corporate lease plates, out at 1 a.m. "Let's see what this guy is up to." "He was doing exactly the speed limit, Brad," Foley offered tentatively, glancing at the radar. No erratic movement. "He touched the white line," Miller lied effortlessly, already pulling the cruiser out of its hiding spot and accelerating. "Swerving. Probable cause for a wellness check. You gotta learn to see the whole picture, kid. Guys like that driving cars like that at this hour, they're always hiding something." Foley swallowed hard, his hands gripping the armrest. He hadn't seen the car touch the line, but he didn't dare contradict Miller. Miller was a legend in the precinct, notorious for his high arrest rates and the protective shield the police union threw over him whenever complaints surfaced. And complaints did surface mostly from minority neighborhoods, mostly alleging excessive force and fabricated charges. But they were always swept under the rug. Miller flicked the switch. The light bar erupted in a blinding strobe of red and blue, painting the wet highway in violent colors. The siren let out a brief, authoritative wail. Ahead of them, the BMW's turn signal blinked calmly. The driver didn't speed up or panic. He smoothly guided the heavy luxury sedan onto the shoulder, coming to a perfect, controlled stop. "All right, Foley, watch and learn," Miller said, unbuckling his seat belt. He adjusted his duty belt, the heavy leather creaking, and stepped out into the misty rain. He approached the vehicle tactically, touching the trunk of the BMW to leave a fingerprint, a habit ingrained from years on, the force before stopping just behind the driver's side window. The window glided down silently. Behind the wheel sat David Harrington. He was in his late 40s, his temples dusted with gray, his posture impeccably straight. He wore a bespoke charcoal suit that likely cost more than Miller made in a month. But it was Harrington's eyes that were striking. They were calm, analytical, and completely devoid of the fear Miller was so used to seeing. "License, registration, and proof of insurance," Miller barked, resting his hand casually on the butt of his sidearm. It was an intimidation tactic, pure and simple. "Good evening, officer," Harrington replied. His voice was deep, resonant, and remarkably steady. He didn't reach for the glove box. Instead, he kept his hands resting clearly on the top of the leather steering wheel. "May I ask why I was pulled over?" "I asked for your papers, not a conversation," Miller snapped, irritated that his usual dominance wasn't taking hold. "You were swerving back there, crossing the lane markers." "You've been drinking tonight?" "I haven't had a drop of alcohol, officer." "Nor was I swerving. I have a dashboard camera recording the drive, which will confirm I maintained my lane perfectly." Miller's eyes narrowed. He hated the smart ones. He hated the ones who knew their rights. "Dashboard camera or not, I observed a traffic violation. Now hand over your ID before I pull you out of this vehicle for non-compliance." Harrington held Miller's gaze for a long, heavy second. Then, moving slowly and deliberately, he reached into his breast pocket and produced a rich leather wallet. He extracted a newly issued state driver's license and handed it through the window. Miller snatched it. David Harrington. An out-of-state transfer. Where are you coming from, David? Miller asked, deliberately dropping the formal title. I was at a late dinner meeting downtown, Harrington answered smoothly. A late dinner, Miller mocked. Look at me, David. Your eyes look a little glassy. I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle. Foley, standing on the passenger side, shifted uncomfortably. He peered through the rain-streaked glass. The driver looked completely sober. Brad, Foley mumbled over the hood of the car. Maybe we just run his plates and give him a warning. Shut up, Foley, Miller hissed. He turned back to Harrington. Step out, now. Harrington didn't argue. He calmly unbuckled his seatbelt, opened the heavy door, and stepped out into the rain. He stood a full 3 inches taller than Miller, an imposing figure of quiet authority. Turn around, hands on the roof, Miller ordered. He patted Harrington down aggressively, finding nothing but a high-end smartphone and a set of keys. Stand right here. Do not move, Miller commanded. He leaned into the BMW, supposedly conducting a visual sweep for officer safety and plain view contraband. He rummaged through the center console, leaving papers scattered. He checked the glove compartment. Nothing. Frustration boiled over into malice. Miller had made the stop based on his own prejudices, and coming up empty-handed in front of the rookie would make him look weak. He couldn't let this arrogant man in a suit drive away feeling victorious. With his back turned to Foley and Harrington, Miller reached into a hidden, zippered compartment on his tactical vest. He pulled out a small, clear plastic baggie containing a white, powdery substance, a drop piece he kept precisely for moments like this. With a practiced flick of his wrist, he tossed the baggie onto the floor mat beneath the passenger seat. Miller backed out of the car, a triumphant, ugly smirk spreading across his face. Well, 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 Miller drawled, shining his heavy maglite onto the passenger floorboard so Foley could see. What do we have here? Looks like your fancy dinner included dessert, David. Foley's eyes went wide. He looked at the baggie, then at Harrington, then at Miller. He knew he hadn't seen that baggie when he looked through the window a minute ago. A cold knot formed in the rookie's stomach. Harrington looked at the floorboard, then slowly turned his head to look at Miller. There was no panic. There was no outrage. There was only a cold, chilling smile. Is that right, officer? Harrington asked softly. You found it under my seat? That's right, pal. Possession of a Schedule line narcotic. Turn around. Put your hands behind your back. Oh. The metallic snick-snick of the handcuffs locking around David Harrington's wrists sounded unusually loud against the backdrop of the humming highway. Miller pulled the cuffs tighter than necessary, digging the steel into Harrington's skin, a petty display of power. You have the right to remain silent, Miller recited, roughly spinning Harrington around to face the cruiser. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. As Miller droned through the Miranda warning, Harrington simply stared at him. It wasn't the stare of a defeated man. It was the gaze of an auditor reviewing a faulty ledger. Foley opened the back door of the patrol car, his hands visibly shaking. Watch your head, the rookie whispered as Harrington slid onto the hard plastic back seat. Don't coddle the junkie, Foley, Miller barked, slamming the door shut. The drive back to the 12th precinct was suffocatingly tense. Miller drove with an exaggerated swagger, occasionally glancing in the rearview mirror to gloat at his captive. You thought you were untouchable in that fancy German tank, didn't you, Dave? Miller taunted. Thought the rules didn't apply to you. Well, welcome to the real world. That much blow? The DO's going to have a field day. You're looking at a felony conviction. Kiss that corporate job goodbye. Harrington sat motionless, ignoring the bait. He memorized the badge numbers of both officers. He noted the time of the arrest, the precise location on the highway, and the specific wording Miller used. Every piece of data was being filed away in a mind trained for federal prosecution. Foley stared blankly out the passenger window, the city lights blurring in the rain. He was drowning in the moral crisis. He knew Miller had planted the drugs. He had heard the rumors at the academy about testing and dropping evidence, but seeing it happen in real time to a man who was clearly completely innocent paralyzed him. If he spoke up, Miller would destroy his career before it even started. The blue wall of silence was absolute. At 2005 a.m., the cruiser pulled into the secured underground garage of the 12th Precinct. The building was a concrete brutalist structure, smelling of damp uniforms, cheap coffee, and decades of despair. Miller hauled Harrington out of the back of the car and marched him toward the booking elevators. They rode up to the main floor, stepping out into the chaotic buzz of the precinct. Telephones were ringing, exhausted detectives were typing furiously at ancient keyboards, and the air was thick with the scent of floor wax and stale sweat. "Look what the cat dragged in," Sergeant Harrison grunted from behind the elevated booking desk. Harrison was a massive man, a 20-year veteran counting down the days to his pension. "What do we got, Miller?" "Caught a live one on the West Side Expressway," Miller said proudly, tossing the bagged white powder onto the desk. "Swerving, erratic driving. Conducted a search and found this little party favor under the passenger seat." Harrison whistled. "Looks like an 8-ball. Heavy charge." "Name?" "David Harrington," Harrington said clearly, stepping forward to the yellow line on the floor. "Empty your pockets, Mr. Harrington." "Everything on the counter," Harrison commanded. Harrington, now uncuffed for the booking process, methodically emptied his pockets. He placed his wallet, his phone, and a heavy platinum wedding band on the scuffed counter. "Take off the tie, the belt, and the shoelaces," Harrison ordered boredly. As Harrington complied, Miller leaned against the desk, smirking. "Make sure you log that suit, Sarge. Probably the last time he wears one for a few years. I'll be in the bullpen doing the paperwork. Foley, come with me. You need to learn how to write an airtight arrest report." Foley hesitated, looking at Harrington with eyes full of guilt, before scurrying after Miller like a frightened doll. Harrington was fingerprinted, photographed, and escorted down a narrow cinder-block hallway to the temporary holding cells. The heavy iron door clanged shut, the echo ringing in the damp space. The cell was barren, just a stainless steel toilet and a concrete bench bolted to the wall. Sitting on the cold concrete, Harrington finally allowed himself a long, deep breath. He had known the 12th Precinct was corrupt. The federal mandate had sent him here precisely because the sheer statistical improbability of Miller's arrest records regarding minority drivers on the West Side Expressway screened off systemic abuse. But seeing it firsthand, experiencing the cold, calculated maliciousness of it, solidified his resolve. 30 minutes later, an officer walked by the bars. "Hey, suit, you get one phone call. Make it quick." Harrington was escorted to a wall-mounted phone at the end of the cell block. He dialed a number from memory. It rang twice. "Wright," a gravelly voice answered. It was Deputy Commissioner Thomas Wright, one of the few men in the city's upper echelon who was completely untainted by the precinct's rot. "Thomas, it's David," Harrington said softly. "David, it's 3 a.m. Where are you?" "I'm currently a guest of the city at the 12th Precinct. Holding cell 3. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. "You're joking. They actually arrested you?" Officer Bradley Miller, accompanied by a rookie named Foley. "Miller initiated a stop without probable cause, illegally searched my vehicle, and planted a bag of narcotics under my passenger seat." Harrington's voice remained deadpan, delivering the facts as if reading a grocery list. "Good God," Wright muttered. "We suspected he was dirty, but to pull a drop job on a random traffic stop." "It wasn't random, Thomas. He profiled me." The audit was right. The precinct is operating like a cartel, and Miller is their chief earner. He believes he is completely untouchable. Are you okay? Did they rough you up? I'm fine. But the trap is set. The paperwork is being filed right now. Once he signs that sworn arrest report, he's committed perjury, evidence tampering, and civil rights violations under color of law. "I'm coming down there," Wright said, his voice hardening into steel. "I'm calling Captain Davies, and I'm bringing the federal monitors." "Let them finish the paperwork first," Harrington instructed coldly. "I want Miller entirely locked into his lies. I want his signature on the dotted line. Come down at 6 a.m., right when the morning shift rolls in. Let's do this in front of everyone." "Understood, Chief," Wright said. "Hang tight. Harrington hung up the phone and walked calmly back to his cell. Meanwhile, in the squad room, Miller aggressively pecked at a keyboard, finalizing the arrest report. He embellished the details, claiming Harrington was sweating profusely, stuttering, and acting aggressively. He documented the discovery of the drugs in excruciating fictional detail. "All right, kid," Miller said, printing the document and sliding it across the desk to Foley. "Sign here, attesting as the secondary officer on the scene." Foley stared at the signature line. His hand hovered over the paper. "Brad, what if he fights this? What if he gets a good lawyer?" "He won't fight it," Miller sneered, leaning back in his chair. "They never do. It's his word against 2 sworn police officers. And the courts always believe the badge. Sign the paper, Foley, and welcome to the real police force." With a trembling hand, Kevin Foley signed his name, sealing his complicity. Miller grabbed the paper, signed his own name with a flourish, and tossed it into the outbox. "Bust of the week," Miller grinned, putting his hands behind his head. He had no idea that the ink on that page was the warrant for his own destruction. At 6 a.m., the 12th Precinct underwent its daily metamorphosis. The exhausted graveyard shift shuffled into the locker rooms, replaced by the boisterous, over-caffeinated morning crew. Rain still battered the high, wire-meshed windows, but inside, the bullpen was bright and buzzing. Officer Bradley Miller sat on the edge of his desk, holding a steaming styrofoam cup of black coffee, holding court. A small group of officers had gathered around to hear about the night's exploits. Miller was practically glowing, his ego inflating with every retold detail. "I'm telling you, the guy was a ghost," Miller chuckled, taking a sip. "Rolling in a brand new 7 Series, custom Italian suit, looking at me like I was the one who pulled him over. Gave me the whole 'do you know who I am' routine, but a junkie is a junkie." Found a massive 8-ball tucked right under his seat. "He's sitting in holding cell 3 right now, probably crying to his corporate daddy." Across the room, rookie Kevin Foley sat quietly at his terminal, staring blankly at the blinking cursor on his screen. His stomach was a tight knot of acid and dread. He hadn't spoken a word since signing the arrest report. He felt physically ill, the weight of the perjury pressing down on his chest like an anvil. "Cheer up, kid," Miller called out, noticing Foley's pale complexion. "You got your first major felony bust. The captain's going to love this at the morning briefing. You're rolling with the big dogs now." Just as the words left Miller's mouth, the heavy double doors of the precinct swung open with a violent crash. The bullpen instantly fell dead silent. Striding through the doors was Deputy Commissioner Thomas Wright. He was a towering, no-nonsense man with a reputation for merciless discipline. But he wasn't alone. Flanking him was Captain Robert Davies, the precinct commander, who looked utterly terrified. Behind him marched 4 men in sharp, dark suits, wearing the unmistakable gold badges of the Internal Affairs Bureau, clipped to their belts. Miller straightened up, quickly tossing his coffee cup into the trash. The swagger vanished from his posture, replaced by the rigid, instinctual discipline of a street cop facing the top brass. Commissioner Wright didn't look at the sergeants. He didn't look at the lieutenants. His eyes swept the room and locked directly onto Miller. "Officer Miller," Wright's voice boomed across the silent bullpen, carrying the weight of a thunderclap. "Sir," Miller barked, stepping forward. "Just wrapping up the shift, Commissioner. Good morning." Wright's expression was carved from granite. "Where is the prisoner from the 1:15 a.m. traffic stop on the West Side Expressway?" Miller blinked, slightly confused but eager to impress. "Holding cell 3, sir. Suspect's name is David Harrington. Caught him with a substantial amount of Schedule I narcotics." "I have the full arrest report right here, Captain Davies," Wright interrupted, ignoring Miller completely. "Bring him up, now." Captain Davies practically sprinted toward the holding cells, followed closely by 2 of the IA detectives. The tension in the room was suffocating. Cops exchanged nervous glances. Nobody breathed. Foley felt his legs go numb. He knew with sudden, terrifying clarity that the world was about to end. A minute later, the heavy metal door of the holding corridor clanged open. Captain Davies emerged, leading David Harrington into the center of the bullpen. Harrington looked exactly as he had on the highway. His charcoal suit was slightly wrinkled from the concrete bench, but his posture was flawless. He didn't look like a defeated suspect. He looked like a general inspecting his troops. He calmly adjusted his cuffs, his eyes scanning the room until they found Miller. The same cold, analytical smile returned to his face. Commissioner Wright stepped forward and did something that made the collective breath of the 12th Precinct catch in their throats. He extended his hand. "Chief Harrington," Wright said loudly, his voice echoing off the cinderblock walls. "I apologize for the delay and for the accommodations." Harrington shook the commissioner's hand firmly. "Not at all, Thomas. It was an incredibly illuminating experience." Miller's blood ran cold. The color drained from his face so fast he swayed on his feet. "Chief, excuse me." "Commissioner," Miller stammered, his voice suddenly small and reedy. "There must be some mistake. This man is a civilian. He's a suspect." Harrington turned to face Miller, his hands casually slipping into his trouser pockets. "Allow me to introduce myself, Officer Miller. I am David Harrington. As of yesterday morning, I am the newly appointed chief of the Internal Affairs Bureau for this city." A collective gasp rippled through the bullpen. Cops physically took a step back from Miller, as if his sudden toxicity were contagious. Foley buried his face in his hands, stifling a sob. "The mayor's office," Harrington continued, his voice calm, clear, and utterly lethal, "received data indicating a statistical anomaly regarding traffic stops and drug seizures on the West Side Expressway. The numbers suggested a highly organized pattern of racial profiling, unlawful searches, and evidence tampering, specifically centered around you." "That's a lie," Miller shouted, panic finally breaking through his shock. "He's a suspect. He had drugs in his car. Foley saw it. Tell them, Foley." Foley didn't look up. He just shook his head, tears spilling onto his desk. "Ah, yes, the drugs," Harrington said smoothly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his smartphone. "As I informed you during the stop, my vehicle is equipped with a high-definition dashboard camera. It not only records the exterior view, but also captures the cabin's interior and audio. Furthermore, that footage is not stored locally. It is continuously live-synced to a secure, encrypted cloud server maintained by the Department of Justice." Harrington tapped a few buttons on his screen. "I spent the last 4 hours in your holding cell reviewing the footage on my phone. The camera clearly captures you, Officer Miller, reaching into a hidden compartment on your tactical vest, removing a small plastic baggie, and throwing it onto my floor mat while my back was turned." Miller stumbled backward, bumping into a desk. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The blue wall of silence he had relied on for 12 years was crumbling to dust around him. "You didn't just arrest a civilian," Commissioner Wright stepped in, his voice dripping with disgust. "You illegally detained, framed, and falsified official documents against the Chief of Internal Affairs. You signed a sworn affidavit stating you found narcotics. That is perjury. The baggie you planted. We just had the lab test the residue. It's heavily cut cocaine. Which means you are currently carrying and distributing Schedule I narcotics while in uniform." Wright turned to the IA detectives. "Arrest him." Wait, no!" Miller screamed as 2 suits grabbed his arms, throwing him roughly against the very desk he had been bragging on minutes prior. The metallic snick-snick of the handcuffs locking around Miller's wrists echoed identically to the sound he had inflicted on Harrington hours before. "Officer Bradley Miller," one of the IE detectives read, pulling the cuffs tight. "You have the right to remain silent. I highly suggest you use it." Harrington walked slowly over to where Miller was pinned against the desk. He leaned in close, his voice dropping to a whisper meant only for the corrupt cop. "You thought you were untouchable in your uniform, didn't you, Brad? Thought the rules didn't apply to you. Well, welcome to the real world." Harrington turned away from the trembling man and looked toward the rookie. "Officer Foley, stand up." Foley stood, his legs shaking violently. "You have 10 seconds to decide how the rest of your life plays out," Harrington said coldly. "You signed a falsified arrest report. You are an accessory to multiple felonies. But I know you didn't plant the drugs. My office right now. Walk." The fallout was a swift, merciless media firestorm. Within 48 hours, Leaked dashboard footage of the midnight traffic stop played on every news channel in the city. The mayor called an emergency press conference, standing shoulder to shoulder with Chief David Harrington, to announce a scorched earth campaign against precinct corruption. Inside the sterile interrogation rooms of the Internal Affairs Bureau, rookie Kevin Foley broke completely. Desperate to avoid a concrete cell, Foley signed a blistering 60-page confession. He detailed every illicit off-the-books practice Bradley Miller had dragged him into over the past month. Foley surrendered his badge and accepted a lifetime ban from law enforcement. He escaped prison by cooperating, but his career was dead collateral damage of his own silent complicity. Bradley Miller, however, faced the full, unrestrained wrath of the justice system. Stripped of his firearm and his dignity, Miller sat in solitary confinement at the county jail, the very facility he had packed with falsely accused men. His union representative, a notoriously aggressive fixer named Gary Henderson, tried to spin the narrative. Henderson held press conferences claiming administrative overreach, but the public laughed him off the podium. High-definition, cloud-sent video of Miller planting cocaine left zero room for reasonable doubt. Henderson attempted a backdoor plea deal, offering Miller's resignation to avoid federal civil rights charges. District Attorney Michael Sullivan, famous for dismantling corrupt public officials, flatly rejected the offer. Your client weaponized his badge to kidnap and frame a civilian based on his race and his vehicle, DA Sullivan told Henderson across a polished mahogany table. He possessed narcotics, committed perjury, and violated federal civil rights laws. There is no deal. We are going to bury him. Faced with the crushing weight of Foley's testimony, forensic audits, and his own recorded actions, Miller's defense imploded. 5 months later, avoiding a trial that would only publicly humiliate him further, Miller pleaded guilty to all charges. The sentencing hearing was standing room only. David Harrington sat in the front row, his expression an unreadable mask of calm authority. Judge Harrison Caldwell peered down from the bench at the disgraced cop. Miller, swimming in an oversized orange jumpsuit, trembled visibly, a hollow shell of the neighborhood tyrant he used to be. "Mr. Miller," Judge Caldwell boomed, his voice echoing against the oak-paneled walls. "A police badge represents a sacred public trust. You weaponized that trust. You operated under the delusion that your uniform shielded you from the very laws you swore to uphold. You ruined innocent lives to stroke your own fragile ego." Caldwell adjusted his glasses, his tone turning to ice. "To allow a predator like you back into society without severe consequence would be a massive insult to justice. I sentence you to 96 months in federal prison. Furthermore, you are permanently stripped of your city pension." The gavel slammed down like a gunshot. Miller collapsed into a weeping mess as federal marshals dragged him out of the courtroom, completely abandoning his tough guy facade. Back at the 12th precinct, the cleanup was absolute. Utilizing the evidence uncovered by Harrington's trap, IAB indicted 3 sergeants and forced half a dozen officers into early retirement. Auditing systems were modernized and the toxic culture was ripped out by the roots. Sitting in his high-rise office at IAB headquarters, Chief Harrington signed off on the precinct's final restructuring order. The city was vast, and shadows would always exist. But the corrupt cops hiding in the dark now understood a chilling reality. The man hunting them was no longer playing by their rules. On AD. Conclusion: if this story of ultimate karma and justice satisfied you, don't keep it to yourself. Smash that like button. Share this video with your friends to spread the word that no one is above the law, and hit subscribe for more intense, real-life drama stories. Drop a comment below. What would you have done if you were in the rookie's shoes? Let's debate. See you in the next one.